So there is no payout for you at the end of the day when you short. There is no payout for you at the end of the day when you actually successfully short and time the perfect opportunity to short the AI bubble, right? Because if that fails, then everything is gone. This is yet another example of this, right? OpenAI. In a new podcast, Sam Altman says, when something gets sufficiently huge, the federal government is kind of the insurer of the last resort, as we've seen in various financial crises. Given the magnitude of what I expect AI's economic impact to look like, I do think the government ends up as the insurer of last resort. But there is one other problem here, okay? When you get too big to fail, I saw this as well. 4 days out from my life-changing surgery, Aetna has denied the appeal for my brain surgery. To be clear, when I signed up to Aetna months ago, the coordinator had confirmed they would cover the surgery. Then a week ago, they said the surgery was too experimental/elective and denied coverage. We appealed. The appeal was just denied today. Now my neurosurgeon is trying to do a peer-to-peer consult with someone at Aetna to explain why I need it so we don't lose the surgery date on Monday morning. Aetna is not being responsive. This is sadistic and a violation of basic trust. Please spread this so they can't ignore it. They may not care if I live or die, but people should know just what kind of company they're dealing with. And please pray they are able to have a peer-to-peer consult with my neurosurgeon and have a change of heart. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing here? Like, this is an untenable system. How can people not look at this and say, this is devil work? But as long as some people are making money somewhere along the way, it's fine.
At some level, when something gets sufficiently huge, whether or not they are on paper, the federal government is kind of the insurer of last resort, as we've seen in various financial crises and insurance companies screwing things up. So I guess, given the magnitude of what I expect AI economic impact to look like, sort of, I do think the government ends up as like the insurer of last resort, but I think I mean that in a different way than you mean that, and I don't expect them to actually be like writing the policies in the way that maybe they do for nuclear.
And there's a big difference between the government being the insurer of last resort and the insurer of first resort.
Why is he saying that in public? Well, two reasons. One, what the heck are you going to do about it? Absolutely nothing. And two, this is actually an assurance to the investors. He's saying that because he realizes that right now there is a little bit of panic around the AI bubble, that it might actually be a bubble. I obviously think it is. And they're over-promising something that at least more educated people keep telling me is impossible. AGI, right? Like the notion that they are going to have this explosive advancements in AI technology that magically arrives us at artificial general intelligence, like what you understand as like iRobot, right? Like the actual real AI, not LLMs, not just chatbots, but like real working artificial general intelligence. And the thing is, well, that has been the promise thus far. That requires a tremendous amount of investment and a tremendous amount of failure along the way. We're not even talking about the goals of AGI, obviously. The goals of AGI is to displace the labor force in its entirety. Having said that, what they're trying to accomplish is just beat China to AGI, or at least a more competent version of AI that can successfully displace the existing labor force and create new super profit structures, okay, which rid the need for labor in its entirety. And God knows what that would do to the already exploding wealth disparity that exists in this country and in the Western world in general. Having said that, because there are fears that they might not be able to continue white-knuckling through this process, that he has to sit there and say, no, don't worry, the government will bail us out. The problem, however, is if the bubble bursts after becoming enormous, and it has already, because outside of the AI stock market gains, the GDP growth in this country last year was 0.1%. Okay, it's like 5 major companies that are the entirety of the stock market at this point. Like it's insane. the bubble has gotten to such a ridiculous size that I don't even know if the American government could save it or could bail it out. So, like, I think there is such a thing as like too big to fail, but then there is also such a thing as like something that has become so large that even the American government can't bail it out. And if there was anything that would do it, yeah, there's too big to fail and then there's too big to bail. If there's anything that is close enough to being too big to bail where it ends up cooking the American government and collapsing the global financialized economy, it could be this AI bubble. The problem is that there's a liquidity crisis, a private credit crisis, private equity is over-leveraged, commercial real estate is dying, repo is up, unemployment is the worst it's been since 2003. These are dominoes. The American government is not nimble enough to do anything about it, or competent enough to do anything about it, or the American government structure, albeit still incredibly powerful, does not have the proper tools to do anything about it because their entire purpose is to advance the interests of capital. And capital has a tendency to self-destruct. Capital is so invested in short term that they don't even realize the broader long-term consequences of these actions, of this gamification of the system. So they get ahead of their own long-term stability interests. Because when everything collapses, you're cooked. All of the wealth in the world will not help you, right? What are you going to do? Even if you are so wealthy that you can hire like private mercenaries to defend you and hire private services that only serve the interests of the super, super, super wealthy, do you really want to live in that world? Like, what good is that world if it does not, if it's not the world that we know right now? Like, what does it matter? Is it even worth living in a world like that? And the same argument could be made for climate change as well, where it's like a lot of these wealthy billionaires think, we can overcome, especially in the short term, the most damaging aspects of anthropogenic climate change. But it's like, but do you want to live in a world where there is extreme weather conditions all the time? Like, are you that short-sighted that you can't see that this is not a habitable world to live in, especially for your next generation as well? It's crazy. Yeah, OpenAI is the gargantuan AI bubble. It lost $12 billion last quarter, but keeps announcing huge new deals to invest in companies with money it doesn't have. So OpenAI wants a U.S. federal backstop for the government to back its investments. Too big to fail 2.0. OpenAI's CFO didn't just say the company wants a federal backstop for chip investment. She said, and I think we're seeing that. The U.S. government has been incredibly forward-leaning. Then she immediately took to LinkedIn to claim that's not what she meant.
This is where we're looking for an ecosystem of banks, private equity, maybe even governmental, the ways governments can come to bear.
Meaning like a federal subsidy or something?
Meaning like just, first of all, the backstop, the guarantee that allows the financing to happen. That can really drop the cost of the financing, but also increase the loan to value, so the amount of debt that you can take.
Time to short OpenAI. Brother, when we say too big to bail or too big to fail, shorting companies like this don't matter because there is no system after that. Do you see what I mean? Like, too big to bail in the 2008 financial crisis actually yielded tremendous benefits for people who were ahead of the game and shorted, right? But there was a next day. My point is, I don't think there is a next day because of the gargantuan size that the AI bubble is, / the way that, and also the way that like our capitalist forces have completely dominated the government, that if the dominoes fall, I think the structure will not remain at all. So there is no payout for you at the end of the day when you short. There is no payout for you at the end of the day when you actually successfully short, like and time the perfect opportunity to short the AI bubble, right? Because if that fails, then everything is gone. It's still not as big as .com, and there was the next day in 2000. You're wrong. Okay. Maybe I don't understand it. OpenAI is not a public company / in the stock. It would be NVIDIA. It's value at $1 trillion. I disagree. It will be super bad, but not the end of the USA. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too alarmist.
On top of an equity portion for
So some federal
finance.
backstop for chip investment.
Exactly. And I think we're seeing that. I think the U.S.
The reason why I don't think you can compare this to the dot-com bubble is because there was still, like, it was a different time, right? There were still companies that were building shit, okay? Not every aspect of the American industry or not every aspect of the American market was bankified as it is currently. Like, there wasn't an entire collapse in confidence that destroyed everything. Whereas right now, I think the opportunity is ripe for a complete collapse because everything is built around the confidence that the American government has to keep things going. And they're saying it. I mean, that's what Sam Altman is saying here. They're saying, like, don't worry, the American government has us. It has our backs because if we fail, then everything falls apart. This is the gamble. This is the dangerous gamble that the American government has made, which basically says, like, no, this is the next initiative in tech, and it's not going to be born about from the public sector and the public research, which has a lot more room to fail, and you can dump a lot of money into it and make it fail on the sidelines until you actually world-changing success like DARPA with the internet, right? This is in front of you, in front of your eyes, as material conditions are worsening, and where all systems go, we're just like entirely reliant on this pie in the sky technological achievement that will arrive us at this completely new world. We're not even thinking about like the ethical considerations. We're not thinking about the considerations of like what the next day will look like. I'm not even getting into that. I'm not even getting into that side of things because, like, who knows how that will work? Who knows how that will look like? Who knows what that will look like? Sorry. Why this analyst says the AI bubble is 17 times bigger than the dot-com bust. At this point, even the concept of an AI bubble seems to be in a bubble. In fact, Deutsche Bank analyst said last month that the AI bubble has already been burst. Perhaps some corners of the internet are bored of the bubble talk. That's not making the market any less bubbly. Just this week, the Financial Times wrote that 10 AI startups, not a dollar in profit among them, have gained nearly $1 trillion in market value over the past 12 months. That is, to use a technical term, bananas. Even as Wall Street analysts and tech media increasingly question the hype, drawing uneasy comparisons in the late 1990s, the AI industry's response has been to shrug and watch their valuations tick higher and higher. The AI faithful believe the technology will disrupt in a good way, hopefully, virtually every aspect of modern life, from phone operating systems to pharmaceuticals to finance. And even if there is a bubble, proponents say the dot-com bubble gave us companies like Amazon, and the internet became, well, the internet. There are plenty of skeptics countering the AI hype machine, though few professional market analysts have done so as stridently as Julian Garan, a researcher and partner at the UK firm MacroStrategy Partnership. John Green put a video out there where he took money out of his retirement fund and the S&P 500 because it's only driven by AI, and he needed to make sure that he can diversify in other markets. Earlier this month, Garan published a report claiming that we are in the biggest and most dangerous bubble the world has ever seen. Garan concludes that there is a misallocation of capital in the U.S. that makes the current frenzy 17 times bigger than the dot-com bubble and 4 times bigger than the 2008 real estate bubble. That is, needless to say, a bold claim about a phenomenon that is famously hard to predict. I sat down virtually with Garan earlier this week to talk bubbles and why he thinks the AI fervor is, to quote his report, not just a bit bad, but rather the antithesis of socioeconomic progress. At the heart of the note is a golden rule I've developed, which is that if you use large language model AI to create an application or service, it can never be commercial. One of the reasons is the way they were built. The original large language model AI was built using vectors to try and understand the statistical likelihood that words follow each other in the sentence. And while they're very clever, it's a very good bit of engineering required to do it, they're also very limited. The second thing is the way that the LLMs were applied to coding. What they've learned from the coding that's out there, both in and outside the public domain, means that they're effectively showing you learned pieces of code that's, again, going to be limited if you want to start developing new applications. The third set of problems in terms of how it's built is around the idea of scaling. There's a real problem at a certain point in terms of how much you have to spend to improve them. I'd say it's definite that developers have hit a scaling wall. Otherwise, they'd be releasing demonstrably better and better models each time they came to market with a new product. And since ChatGPT 4 came out in March 2023, they haven't really actually raised the bar significantly. What about the argument that ChatGPT, while not perfect, is capable of doing some low-level grunt work that can increase productivity? There are certain bullshit jobs out there, some parts of management, consultancy jobs, where people don't check if you're getting it right or don't know if you've got it right. So you can argue that you can replace bullshit with bullshit. And yes, okay, I'm prepared to accept that you probably can, but that doesn't really make it more broadly useful. See, the reason why this conversation is very different than my analysis on top of this person who is like bringing highlighting like some of the most damaging aspects of the entire system designed around AI success is because of what people consider to be efficiency. If you're a regular ass dude, when you think efficiency, you don't think in market terms. Okay? Regular people, when they think efficiency, they mean, am I getting the best possible service on the consumer side, right? Am I getting the best possible service? And an example I will use is luggage tossers, right? That is very different than the way capitalist corporations analyze efficiency. For them, efficiency means maximum output for minimum input, okay? That means cutting jobs. That's what efficiency is for the capitalist. For the regular person, efficiency is, am I getting my luggage in a reasonable and timely manner, okay? In order to reach efficiency from the consumer standpoint, you actually need to hire more people than you actually need to have, right? Like if we had 10 luggage tossers as opposed to the 5, things would move a lot faster. You know, people would have more free time. People would just like be able to fuck off in the workplace. And that on your on the receiving end, from the consumer standpoint, that would be efficient because you still get your fucking luggage in a more timely manner. But efficiency for the capitalist, for efficiency for the corporation, means you have to cut those jobs and try to figure out how much you can get away with cutting those jobs. Sure, people will wait an hour sometimes to get their luggage, but it's okay. Because we have a monopoly in certain markets, right? So what are they going to do? They have to fly JetBlue. There's no other airline out there. There's no market competition. So we actually won't get punished as heavily as we would. So we can actually cut certain aspects of the service and make more money that way, or drive up profits that way. Okay? So the way we think of efficiency as regular people, as consumers, is very different than the way that the capital owners think of efficiency. Okay? And this is the same problem with bullshit jobs. The other side of this issue, the other side of this, the other side of this problem that is never talked about amongst capital owners and capitalists in general, like the theorists in general, is what that does to the average laborer. Okay? There is no consideration for the regular wage laborer in this conversation whatsoever. There's no consideration for their life. There's no consideration for their workplace conditions. There's no consideration for their families. There's no consideration for what that does to the broader economy. Okay? Bullshit jobs are fine. It's good to have bullshit jobs. Okay? It's good to have bullshit jobs. It's okay. People need to have jobs. And if we did not live in a capitalist organization, live under a capitalist organization of the economy, we could have technological efficiencies in the form of AI that would actually lift the burden off of the backs of many people that could then get the same amount of money, the same wages, and do work, do much shorter hours of labor. Okay. If someone just basically sat in front of an autonomous machine and they did not displace the existing labor force in the interest of, again, efficiency from the capitalist perspective, then the economy will be much healthier overall. Okay? The capitalist solution to this is UBI. The capitalist solution to this is, oh, just let the robots do all the work, and then eventually, in order to avoid mass discontent and riots, we just give you some crumbs. Okay? But it is obvious that capital owners don't even want to give you those crumbs, or they want to give you the minimal amount of crumbs that they can give you without you taking out the pitchforks and burning everything to the fucking ground. That's not a stable system. That is not a stable system at all. Okay? The system has to change. Our understanding of how productivity works, our understanding of how labor works has to change. This is what I mean when I say we have to center the working class in our politics. We have to center the labor force in our politics in order to ensure universal stability, long-term stability. But I'm afraid time is running out. Okay? The AI ecosystem can't really sustain itself. You have NVIDIA making a ton of money. Anybody else, the data centers, the LLM developers, the software developers who use LLMs, they're heavily loss-making. Consequently, to maintain the process, you need to have continued funding, which is why it looks like a permanent funding tour. But despite all of this, there's no obvious way that they can actually turn this around to a profit. It's hope over realistic expectation. When you run out of investors, then the whole thing is going to roll over. Are investors actually pulling back? The amount of venture capital willingness to fund some of these startups, especially the software developers, is beginning to diminish because they're valued so highly. That leaves you with basically SoftBank, which has had to raise a lot of debt against its shares to fund the first tranche of the OpenAI commitment that it made, and it's still got a bigger second tranche to fund. You've got foreign states like, say, Saudi Arabia, but there aren't many countries who have unlimited spending power, and that leaves NVIDIA as a sort of a last man standing. Nightcap, are we in the process of deflating or is the bubble still growing? Well, with AI, I can't say it's starting to deflate. We're just a week past all-time highs. So it'd be kind of arrogant to say that that was definitely the top, but it's certainly drawing closer. I have to ask, because I ask myself this all the time. What if you're wrong? What if the hype is real? Well, there are two ways I'd be wrong. One is it just takes longer to break than I thought, which to be honest, it already has. And what happens if I'm wrong in that way is simply that they continue building things that aren't fundamentally useful to the economic society. I don't think this is useful fundamentally to the economic society. It is useful to raise the stakes and to gamble harder because that's just what the stock market is now. It is turned into this major gambling ring. Major gambling ring where the highest rungs of capitalist society control all the stakes, and they have a vested interest in continuing this game, because if they don't, then everything collapses and they can't continue bringing in profits year over year. If it carries on for another year or another 2 years because they manage to persuade someone to provide funding, the more people are doing stuff that's not going to make a return. The future is not going to be as bright. Future gross domestic product will be lower than it would be if they didn't do this stuff and they just went about doing some mundane things that people actually valued. And if I'm completely wrong and someone could come up with super intelligence, well, that completely changes the world and we'd be depending on whoever controlled the systems. We could be in a utopia of sorts, or we could be in a brave new world, or we could be in a utopia like Player Piano, the Kurt Vonnegut book, where everyone's employed, apart from some people living in their ivory towers. To be honest, I think that's beyond our current capability as an industrial society to pull it off. If that starts changing, then I'll change my mind very quickly. I just haven't seen it. I like that as the contradictions do worsen, as the contradictions heighten, you even see some guys like this person is a capitalist through and through, to the bone. But real analysts that look to the existing systems, even with their horse blinders, their pro-capitalist horse blinders that cannot see a world outside of this organization of the economy, still can't help but recognize that this is not really useful, okay? That's pretty alarming when you have econ bros going, this stuff is it useful really? Because these aren't like card-carrying commies, right? These are not card-carrying commies at all. One thing no one talks about is how normal investors don't like this gamblingization of the stock market. For example, Warren Buffett is sitting on a lot of cash, around $400 billion, and is waiting for the bubble, so there's many, many boomers. That means no money in circulation. Trump just compared himself to FDR in Truth Social because he's going to propose a new lifetime of debt, 50-year mortgage plan as a solution to the housing crisis. Oh my God. It comes back to the contradiction between the forces of production and the relations of production. Technological development directly undermines a society anchored around wage labor. Yes. The difference, however, is that I think liberal capitalist society has done a fairly good job up until recently of making people feel like their material conditions are improving. Although wealth is a relative construct, although poverty is a relative construct, right? And therefore, when the living conditions of the bottom slowly, right? People do think, well, things aren't that bad. And to a certain degree, they're correct. We are not at the Great Depression level yet, right? We are not at the level of like mass starvation. The wealth disparity that exists is even larger. It's larger than the time of the French Revolution. It's larger than the Gilded Age. It is larger. But the reason why there is not the same level of discontent, that existed back then that caused people to take up arms and engage in violent revolution, right? Whether it be a bourgeois revolution or not, it doesn't matter. It was still a violent revolution, or even a more modest reformist version of that, like we saw with the fucking New Deal. But even though then there was a lot of labor militancy and a lot of discontent and a lot of violence that took place in the buildup to that, reformist way of getting out of that crisis. Whoa. Scared the shit out of me, Kaya. Calm down. What happened? God damn. Scared the frick out of me. Also, at the time of the French Revolution, the church was the only propaganda tool for the aristocracy to justify its power. 50-year mortgage at 20 years old means you finish at 70 with no extra payments? Yeah. Let's see what Lena Khan had to say about this AI stuff.
We're also now hearing increasingly a lot of these executives admit that there's probably a bubble here, that they're, over-investing. And just this last week, we heard suggestions from one of the companies that, maybe the government's going to need to bail us out one day. And so, I think all of the concerns around privatizing benefits and profits, but socializing risk and pain is something that they very much seem headed towards. And we're going to need a really assertive government to really stand up to that. And I worry that's the last thing we have in place right now.
Yeah, I just don't know. I don't know where we go from here, because the environment is different. We live in a post-World War II. If we're not going to talk about like the political economy, right? Even if we're just going to think about like the socio-political constructs that exist, like moving in the direction of fascism, which obviously these things are intertwined. It's impossible to think about one without the other. But even when we think about like the growing momentum of fascism, it's actually happening through almost a reformist. It's happening through a reformist version of fascism that we had not experienced prior. Because when fascism was initially invented, it was a revolutionary movement. It was billed as a revolutionary movement that came about through the parliamentary structure, but with a lot of violence at the time. But there was it was seen as a robust response to the growing, both revolutionary and reformist socialist movements that were in existence. And liberals, obviously, in Europe sided with the fascists, right? Now we have two liberal parties, with one center-right liberal party, which is the Democratic Party, and one far-right liberal party that is becoming an illiberal party. It's becoming a post-liberal party. It is reconstructing itself to become a fascist party. And I don't know what that looks like without robust response. I don't know how that works when there is no post-liberalism on the left side, when there is no organizational power on the left side. Because people, when there is no organizational factor on the left side, whether it be Marxism, socialism, communism, anarchism, whatever you want to call it, when there is no organizational structure on that side, people don't have any alternatives. People don't think about the alternatives. Post-liberalism is liberal nonsense. I mean, I'm utilizing the terms that liberals themselves also recognize, because liberalism, once again, as it did in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, is failing. It's collapsing. And when liberalism collapses, you either move in the left direction if there is an organized movement there. And what we saw in the United States of America was like a robust response with the economic collapse that took place, a robust response from labor militancy, communist